All right, welcome to Sportswrap OT. I am Brian Parsons, along with Jeff Snyder, the producer here, and we have a very, very special guest. He is Jack Ankerson. He has a brand new book out called Jack of All Sports. Let's get it framed up right there.
There
Jack.
it is. There it is.
Jack, the voice of Old Dominion Public Address. He does some Norfolk Tides games. I've been to a Virginia Wesleyan game, and he's been doing it. The PIT. One of the most recognizable voices in all of Hampton Roads, the pride of Neenah, Wisconsin, Jack Ankerson. Jack, thank you for joining us today.
Well, it's great to be here, Brian. Just look forward to it now.
A book.
A book.
Why a book, Jack?
Um,
Well, let's get the full title though. It doesn't fit on here. Jack of All Sports, an ordinary man with an extraordinary life.
Extraordinary life.
Okay, that's a lot to live up to in a book.
Well, we tried.
So what was the behind writing the book?
Well, over the course of time, many people have suggested, based on knowing me and knowing where I've been and what I've done, have suggested, why don't you write a book? Well, it gets to that point where why don't you write a book? Yeah, sure. But that's as far as it goes. And then at our neighborhood club one day, several years ago in the summertime, an author, a young lady who's an author, came up to me and she said, I just moved into the neighborhood and somebody said I should get to know you because I'm a big sports nut and I should get to know you. And she also said, and you work with the San Antonio Spurs? I said, not only worked there, I started them. And she said, well, one of my best friends works in the San Antonio Spurs office. She said, let me do some checking up on you. I said, checking up? She said, yeah, I want to learn more about you before I continue this conversation. So she did. And the next time we had an event at the club, she said, you need to write a book. And I'd be very happy to be your author.
Wow.
That's how it started.
So when did you start this?
Right after COVID.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
yeah,
it took some time.
was COVID. And because of some issues that came along in between after COVID and some issues that came up, it took a little while. And we only met once a week. And we decided we would spend an hour once a week. And then we move on to the next week. So it took a while.
So is this a situation like you're visiting a therapist and you're laying on the couch with your hands behind your back and you're just waxing poetically while she dictates everything?
She's there writing while I'm talking. And that's how it all worked out.
Okay, again, the title, Ordinary Man with an Extraordinary Life, and it truly is, and we're going to get to it. A three-sport star at Little Ripon College in Wisconsin. Jack was a two-time All-American in football. He played basketball. He was on the tennis team. He led all three sports to conference championships in his senior year.
It's true.
Quarterback and kicker.
Yes.
I mean, what in the world? Very accomplished athletic career at Ripon. Yeah, do they have a statue of you at Ripon yet?
No, no. No, that'll never happen. But that's the birthplace of the Republican Party, Ripon, Wisconsin. So the schoolhouse is still there. A little trivia, little fact there, but But no, there's no statue of Jack Ankerson there on the campus.
So three sports, excelling at three sports at the college level. What was it like back then having to juggle that and your academics? Because I guess there was no NIL back then, Jack.
No, there certainly was no NIL back there. No, there were. I was in Advanced Army ROTC, so I got a check every month.
Oh.
As when we were juniors and seniors. So that was my NIL money, that whatever I received from the United States Army or from the government. So playing three sports, obviously full time, 9 months out of the year, and we just took them one at a time. And on the last Saturday of football, I had a day off until Monday basketball. And then the same thing with basketball, last Saturday, Sunday off, and play tennis. That's the way it worked. And in between, I had to study. There was time for studying. I mean, that was something that they insisted on at Ripon College.
Yeah. And you're 18 to 22, and you're going to have a social life as well,
You'd like to think you could. But we did the best we could under trying circumstances, those being whatever our coaches said, you can't do this or that or this. So we followed the rules.
Now, the three sports, and again, in this day and age, you see less of that, I think, of athletes are now, they want to focus on one sport.
It's usually, if they do multiple sports, it's usually two max. I never see a
Right,
3-sport
right,
athlete in
right.
college where it's
Yeah.
very rare.
Yeah, you don't see the 3-sporter
Why,
much
why do
at
you,
all.
why do you think that is? Why do you think it's
Well,
become
it's
more
because
specialized?
it started at the youth level now with these coaches for youth groups. They're just driving these kids to go 12 months out of the year with a single sport. And I see many examples of kids by the time they're seniors in high school are just physically done. They're done.
Mhm.
I mean, they've been at this thing for how many years? 12 months, almost 12 months out of the year. And I mean, I have grandchildren that's what they do. Travel baseball, travel basketball, travel lacrosse. That's what they do outside of their regular school activities.
I think I kind of like it better when you can kind of like spread your wings a little bit and play
Mm-hmm.
the different sports and just be exposed to different things and different coaching and everything.
No question about that. And Michael Kadire, local Michael Kadire, is of the same opinion. He said one sport is just you need to participate in more than one. You really do for the good of everybody. And I think that's absolutely true. I don't think there's any question about that.
Well, you parlayed your time at Ripon into being drafted by the Cardinals of the NFL in the 1964 draft.
Correct.
How does that go down? Your numbers must have been extraordinary. I'm assuming Ripon is Division II.
They were actually Division III.
A lot of Division III schools in Wisconsin.
Right.
So Division
Yes,
III,
correct.
amazing. Drafted. How did that go down?
Well, during the course of the year, I would be getting reports that there were scouts in the stands, and the reports would come back. San Francisco was there 1 week, Dallas was there, St. Louis was there, different games that they came to see me. And so, okay, that's fine. I'm glad to hear that. And then basketball came around, and I had a very successful basketball career. And the late Marty Blake was a scout for the old St. Louis Hawks. He came one day to see me play basketball. And after it was done, the manager came up and said, Mr. Blake would like to see you downstairs. I said, sure. So I went down and met Marty Blake. And he said, you're an outstanding athlete, no question about that. He said, but as far as the NBA is concerned, you got several issue problems. One, you're 6'4". 6'4" is kind of a in between. He said, 6'4", you're not really quick. You're fast, but you're not quick. And third, you're white. And he said, so good luck in the NFL. There went my basketball career out the window on that day. But so
Marty, obviously you reconnected with him at the PIT.
I have.
And,
before that, because in the ABA, he
Okay.
ran the Pittsburgh Condors in the ABA.
he was a mainstay for a soundbite at the PIT, and now I guess his son is kind of
Now Ryan's there, right?
taking the mantle there. That is very,
Yeah,
very cool.
yeah. So anyway, that came and went. But then before the NFL draft, I got a couple of phone calls. Would you sign with this team if they drafted you? Would you sign? And the answer was yes, of course I would. And the first day came, and we were in a fraternity house. We were not expecting a telephone call on day one. We're very realistic about where I was and where I played and the whole thing. And that they didn't do this like they do now. The first round only, then the second and third rounds, they did a bunch of them. So the second day came, and all of a sudden somebody said, Ankerson, you got a phone call. And I went to the phone in the fraternity house, one phone in the fraternity house. And there it was St. Louis calling, wanted to know they were going to draft me and would I sign with them.
And you did.
Yeah.
I did.
So you go to a training camp, I assume?
I did. Lake Forest College, that's where their camp was, outside of Chicago, north of Chicago. I sure did. And while I was down there, however, during the training camp, we played I played in 3 exhibition games, special teams, and I didn't get a whole lot of quarterbacking in.
Did they want you as a kicker too?
They asked me, they had me try some afterward, and Jim Bakken said, who was the kicker for the Cardinals, he said, who taught you how to kick? Because
Did you kick like Mark Mosley or Jan Stenerud?
Mark Mosley.
Okay.
Just like Bakken. That's how Bakken kicked. And he said, man, Jack, you... and it was obvious that I wasn't going to supplant our kicker with the St. Louis Cardinals. So the kicking kind of went away. So how did the time there go? Well, the training camps were fun, and I got to be good friends. Sonny Randall,
Sonny Randall.
Charlie Johnson, and a lot of those guys. I got to be good
Pat
friends
Fisher
with those
was
guys.
on that team. I
Pat
believe?
Fisher was there.
Right. Yeah.
No question about that. And they're all good guys, all really, really good guys. And one day, they sent the mail out, and the mail came, and there was a manila envelope for me. And this was during training camp. And the manila envelope was greetings from your Uncle Sam. Happy New Year, Lieutenant. You have orders.
Whoa.
Oh,
Because I was
yeah.
Your
ROTC.
number.
Yeah.
Your number came up.
I was number one in my class, but that had nothing to do with my number coming up. But so I took it into the personnel office, and Abe Stuber was the guy. I said, Abe, I got this, and they want me to report to Fort Benning, Georgia. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, go in and get it over with and come back in 2 years. I said, I mean, I'm hearing stories about how you can work with people so they don't have to do this. And he said, I repeat, go in and get it over with, Jack, and come back in 2 years. They weren't going to make any exceptions for me. And they said, but we look forward to seeing you in 2 years. Okay. So I went home and off to the 2 years in the Army. When I went back home to Neenah, and Neenah is an area of big paper making from the Fox River Valley, from Green Bay all the way down to Oshkosh.
The smell of money. The old paper mills.
Paper mills. And my father was a plant general manager. And so one day, when I got back home, I kind of reconnected for a while. And then one night, my father at dinner said, are you looking for a job? What are you doing? I said, yeah, Dad, I'm going to do that now. He said, well, I've taken a step for you. I said, what's that? He said, you see Shelby Smith at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, coat and tie, at the American Can Company office. Oh,
The American Can Company.
they had bought out the Marathon Paper Company. So it was now under the auspices of American Can, which is a Fortune 500 company back then. I think it still is, or was. Anyway, so I report to Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith said, come to work next Monday. Here I was in sales administration with the idea of getting me into sales and marketing with American Can. So I started
Like an outside sales guy, basically.
not originally. Sales administration first, and then they were going to work with me, sending me to different places. And so I guess I did such a bang-up job in the sales administration office in Neenah, Wisconsin. 6 months later, they shipped me off to Salem, Portland, Oregon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I guess I did such a bang-up job in Salem, Portland, Oregon, they shipped me down to San Francisco for the marketing end of it.
Wow.
And I was in marketing, sales and marketing. I had such clients eventually as Miller High Life, 7-Up. I had Cucamonga Vineyards. I had all kind of interesting people. And had to go to L.A. every 2 weeks.
How old are you?
Let's see. I'm done with football, done with it back home. 26, 7.
This sounds like a pretty good job for a 26-year-old kid. You're probably making pretty good money. You're traveling around.
Got a car.
Right.
And I was single and out in San Francisco.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was okay. And then
It's summer of love.
this amazing guy, an ordinary guy with a lot of funny experiences, And long story short, one day I was told I had to go to Pittsburgh for a regional meeting about certain kinds of motor oil cans that we were selling, and we were going to be doing these new things, and I was going to be the representative on the West Coast. So I had to go to this regional meeting in Pittsburgh. Okay, so fine. Meeting is over. I'm on the plane going back home, back to San Francisco. And I end up we flew first class back in those days. And I would end up sitting next to a balding gentleman on the plane. And I just sat down and didn't say anything. And we get up in the air and I started reading. And I was reading Sporting News, and then I was reading Sports Illustrated, and finally this gentleman looked over and said, "You really into sports?" I said, yeah. He said, "Where are you from?" We got talking, one thing led to another. And then he said, "You played 3 sports in college?" Yeah, I did. And what are you doing? I said, I'm selling cans. And, he said, really? I said, yes, sir. He said, have you read the Sports Illustrated article yet? There's an article in there I think you would find very interesting, he said to me. I said, oh, no, I haven't, but I'm about to. And so in it was a story of the ABA with the Indiana Pacers. And it showed pictures of the players and the wonderful job they were doing in Indiana for being in the ABA. And the general manager was some whiz kid who used to be the assistant GM at Baltimore, was now the head man at the Indiana Pacers. No pictures or anything, just Mel Daniels, picture of Mel Daniels and some of the Indiana Pacer players. Put it all down. He said, what do you think? I said, hey, I think the ABA is a good thing. I said, gives some of these guys a chance to play basketball, play pro basketball, another opportunity. And I said, and this Indiana Pacer franchise sounds like it's doing, and this guy Storin must be some kind of a whiz kid. He said, allow me to introduce myself. Mike Storin.
Oh, wow.
I'm the general manager of the Pacers. Offered me a job before we landed.
Wow.
And this has got to be 71, something around there, the early 70s.
I said, well, I just was getting promoted in San Francisco. And I said, I really appreciated the offer, but I'm living a pretty good life right now in San Francisco, so I'm not quite ready to make that move yet. He said, here's my number. You let me know when you're ready to make the move. I said, okay. Well, one day.
What kind of impression did you make on this guy
He
to
just
offer
loved
you
the
a job?
sports thing, and he got a little bit of my history, and he just said, what are you doing selling cans? What are you doing? Yeah, and sure enough, I hadn't been in Cincinnati maybe 4 months, 5 months.
We're getting closer to Kentucky here, or Indianapolis.
Well, both. I'll tell you how that worked quickly. I will. I'm boring you with this story, but
This is anything but boring.
One day, again, I'll never forget, Claire, the girl in the LA office, said, Jack, there's a Mr. Storin called for you from Louisville. I said, yes. She said, he'd like you to call him. I said, okay. So I did. I said, Mike, he said, now you're in Cincinnati. He said, these are all good moves for you? I said, absolutely. Absolutely. I got a chance to prove myself again. And he said, that's what I'm talking about. I'd like to hire you. I said, I'm not quite ready to do that yet. And he said, okay. So when another month, I guess the end of my 5th month or into the 6th month, and I got a note from Mr. Storin.
Full court press, this guy.
He said, you got 2 weeks.
Oh.
Or I'm not calling anymore. He said, and the way we're going to do this, I'm going to offer you, can you come on a Saturday morning up to Indianapolis within the next 2 weeks? One Saturday morning, drive the 100 miles up to Indianapolis, meet me in my office. I said, sure, I can do that Saturday morning. Young single guy in Cincinnati. And so I went and I got to his office. He got me, closed the door. He said, nobody in this building knows that I'm leaving here to take over the Kentucky Colonels in Louisville.
Wow.
He said, and therefore my 2 weeks is what I wrote to you is what I meant. You got 2 weeks to come join me and let me teach you this business. 2 weeks. If I don't hear from you in 2 weeks, you can never hear from me again.
The long courtship is over if you don't do
You'll
This is
never
fine.
hear from me again.
This is what, 2 or 3 years at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, after me. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
That's
And
wild.
he claims, I guess he must have seen something, you know. And so the first week when Kim went by, and with the Cincinnati sales office, the guys would all get together, the sales guys, on Monday mornings, have lunch, then they plan their weekly schedule. Then Friday they come back in and do their expense accounts and have lunch and call it a day, call it a week. That was the normal setup. So the first Friday, the guys started to get to know that I had this offer. And they said, you'll never go. You won't leave. And they said, your father's been in this business, this company forever, and you won't go, and you're not going anywhere. This is too good for you. The life is good. Well, so we got into the next week. It came down to that Friday at lunch. I still hadn't decided. And so finally, I don't know what it was that just Do it. Went and picked up the phone and called Mike and said, I'm ready to come. He said, okay. So I got a hold of Mike, and he said, okay, here's the deal. We're not going to negotiate. I'll give you more money you're making now, and I'll give you a car, and then we'll talk about everything else when you get here. And I want you here. He gave me a date in the end of 3 weeks or something like that. And we will start.
So what does he want you to do? Are we talking the
he said,
books? Are we talking scouting?
Teach me the business,
Right.
he said. And so I didn't know till I got there, till I reported in for duty.
What a leap of
And-
faith this is.
Yeah. So he said, the first thing I want you to do is you got to learn the business of we got to sell things. So I want you involved in selling and promotions the first year.
Well,
And the ABA at this point is still maybe trying to find its way. It's gaining momentum across the nation.
is.
It's competing with the NBA, which some would say maybe had a less thrilling style than the ABA. The ABA was kind of innovators with the 3-point shot and things like that.
The red, white, and blue ball.
Was it the 2 for one? What was the free throw situation?
Yeah,
The 2 to make 3 to make 2.
3 to make 2.
Three,
yeah.
3 to make 2.
two,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was a weird one.
All kinds of different things. But yeah. And so that's how he said you need to start learning it, and then you'll go from there. I said, I hear you. I hear you.
This is almost a paid internship,
It
Jack.
basically
Yeah.
it was. Yeah, basically that's how it started.
So he saw something in you at a
2 or
very
3 years ago.
Yeah.
young age.
on an airplane.
And
On
wow,
an
wow,
airplane.
wow.
That's how it all
That's-
started. The second year, he moved me into the business operations end of it.
You're getting the full
yeah, you're
He
just
promised me he would.
education of this
He
industry.
told me he would. In my third year, I was assistant to the president.
Man,
Yeah,
talk about the fast track.
yeah. Well, I'm a quick learner.
So eventually you do leave the Colonels and
I
find
do.
your way to San Antonio.
Yeah.
Was that a tough?
Mike Storn called me in one day, and he said, San Antonio's undergoing, Dallas is going
The
undergoing.
Dallas Capitals.
Chaparrals, right?
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
good, Brian. And they're getting out of the business, and they're sort of leasing it to a group in San Antonio who have a year or two to decide if they want to buy it. But it's moving to San Antonio. And nobody from the Dallas organization is going to San Antonio. So they have to have a whole organization. They
Interesting.
have a team. They don't have a coach. They don't have anything, but they got a roster. And you know, Jack, the roster for the Dallas Chaparrals is but so good. I said, I know. He said, anyway, the call went out from the commissioner of the ABA. There were several people invited to apply for the GM's job with the Spurs or with San Antonio. There weren't Spurs yet. You are on that list. And they said they'll take care of the airlines and the hotel, the whole thing, if you're willing to go out for the interview. And I said, and Mike looked at me and he said, that's why you're here. You want to do this. I said, okay, let's do it. Tell them I'll come. Away I went to San Antonio and had a 2-day meeting.
Were they playing at the Hemisphere?
That's where their home court was.
Yeah. I remember that venue. They
Yep.
they even with David Robinson, I think, played there a little bit before they
For
went
a while
for
before they
the
got
dome,
the Alamo
and,
Dome.
and
Yeah.
then the new
And then the
place.
new one, yeah.
And now they're going to even build
Another one.
amazing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress.
well before my time. Well, But anyway, so I went down. We had a nice conversation, a good conversation with these couple of owners. They had a group of people, and then they had like an executive committee that was really in charge of the group, and they were very interesting. And we met the next morning again for another half day. Then I flew home, and a day later, Storin said to me, "You must have made an impression. They want you back down for another interview." Oh, he said, and they're going to send you a ticket and a whole 9 yards. And I went back the second time, and they offered me the job.
Now, what is the market of San Antonio like in 1973, 1974?
It was void of sports. The only thing big down there, like it was in all of Texas, was high school football.
Okay.
And I found out that the basketball coaches, or the offensive line coach, was a head basketball coach for these high schools, and all football. Everything was football related. Everything. 20,000 people plus on Friday night football down there. They're crazy down there. But so the market was there for the taking, and there was no competition basically other than high schools. At that time, there was no college in San Antonio. There was no University of Texas San Antonio. There was a Trinity, a small Division III school there, but other than that, there was nothing there. And minor league baseball, Class A baseball, so it was there, and it's a big city. Now, a lot of it, the demographics, kind of a mixed bag in San Antonio. You can imagine Texas, kind of a mixed bag of demographics, and but that's what it was. That's what we went into right there.
And you were in 1974 the executive of the year in the ABA
After that first year,
by the Sporting News. Was that because of you had to? So you're the GM. Are you constructing the roster?
I'm the only on the roster we got inherited.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
Remember from
But
down.
early, but new additions.
Yeah,
But
like
before the
trades,
draft,
drafts.
though.
Oh,
It was before the draft.
okay.
And we had no coach or anything. So actually, my wife was 8 months pregnant, and we had a house to sell in Louisville. And here I take a new job in San Antonio, Texas. Mr. Popularity. Right? My wife said, "You're doing what? We're going where?" Yeah. And so she had to sell the house, and the baby was born in San Antonio. But it was quite interesting. So on the way to and from, back and forth on weekends, I'd fly home, and I'd be doing some work in the plane. I was the only employee. I hired a couple of secretaries to get. You got to have people answering phones and things. Then I hired a PR guy. Then I hired a business manager, and so I had to go one-on-one to get these people. And then when I got all those people, so the foundation was set with the office. I needed to get a coach. But on one of my trips, we had started talking about colors and logo with an agency and some selected owners that were involved with it too. And so I made a list of all the 4 professional major leagues, baseball, football, hockey, and basketball, and made a list of all the teams and colors. One team of all those 4 leagues.
Look at the
black and
Raiders.
silver.
It would be the Oakland Raiders.
The Raiders. And it just seemed to be a natural fit. When I got back and told them, I said, I think black and silver should be our colors. And
You came up with
That
that.
was you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was the rocket science, how I figured it out. I put all the teams down from all the 4 leagues and picked out the one that, made the most sense. And then they made it easy for logo. We put out a contest for logo. Well, the black and white were our colors. Black and silver were our colors. So we had all kinds of animal nicknames that people sent in, but the Spurs hit home. And I said, my God, can you imagine our logo? SP with a U and a spur.
It's like
Our-
fantastic.
This is you.
It's a great logo.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's iconic.
I know many years down the road. So what are you thinking when they become with Popovich and they become a dynasty that wins 5 NBA championships
Yeah.
and kind of a small medium NBA market? I mean, they're one of the great success stories in NBA history.
No question. No question. It's great. It's great. The fact that we laid the foundation for that whole thing back in 1973, with a lot of sense of pride involved in all that, how that all started.
Now, what was the situation like when you arrived here? I know the Squires. It was not a great
Well,
time for the
no.
franchise.
No, and of course the season was over. I mean, we were in the off season, and so I met them at the Golden Triangle. You know where that was?
That's across the street from Scope, right?
Bingo.
Yeah.
That used to be the #1 place in town. And we had a very nice dinner. We had all these heavyweights from around here at this dinner meeting. And they did. They asked an awful lot of questions, which was fine. And so that's why I was here.
Mm-hmm.
And we finished dessert, and a guy from the bank, John Bernhardt, said, could you go downstairs with one of our guys? We want to chat about some things up here. I said, sure. I'm not going anywhere till tomorrow. I'm going back to Texas tomorrow. Or actually, we were on vacation. Ellie was home, so I was going to go to home in Wisconsin. And I said, fine. So they sent me down with some advertising agency guy, Dan Ballard. I don't know if Lawler Ballard and Little.
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, Dan Ballard, and who I got to know very well. And anyway, so we sat down and had a couple of drinks. And all of a sudden, I don't know, a while later, Mr. Bernhardt came downstairs and he said, what time's your flight tomorrow? I said, I think it's around noon. He said, could you come by my office at the Virginia National Bank building on the 8th floor? He was the man who ran the banks, and I said, yeah, I can do that. Little did I know, when I went to bed that night and got up the next morning to go talk to Mr. Bernhardt, we went through a whole lot of stuff that he'd heard the night before. And then he said, what do you think is about the kind of money you would need to run a front office? How much would it take? And I said, well, you pay this, and start doing some calculating. I gave him a number, and he said, if I were to say to you, you have that much money, and you can decide how you want to pay anybody. You want to take it all and do it all? It's up to you. I said, but I don't think you can do that. I said, no. You see, he said, what I'm doing is offering you the job of the Virginia Squires as the general manager. Well, how do I tell my wife that we were just about to make an offer on a house in San Antonio, and now we're going to come to Norfolk? I said, I need to have a little time to think about it. And he said, fine. He said, but we want you to know we'd like to have you come and run our operation. Okay. So I went back to the hotel. I still had an hour or so. And I said, well, let me call my wife, see what she thinks about this. And her constant comment has been for 50-some years, if that's what you think we should do, then let's do it. That's all I needed.
And that was the last big decision, really, as far as, relocating wise, because you made this your home. Why did the Squires fold?
I can tell you easily. I can answer that because when I agreed to come here to the Virginia Squires, there was one question that I did not answer. I did not ask. And had I got the answer as what I found out the answer was, I would never have been in Norfolk, Virginia. It was my own fault. But on the other hand, things turned out pretty well for me here. But at that time, it was my own fault because I didn't ask the question. The question was this. When I took the job and came here, I said to Ada Mae Lynch, who was the bookkeeper that was here, and I kept her. I needed someone that had been here through all this stuff. And I said, now, you have a payroll account. She said, we do. I said, we have an operating account. I said, we do. She said, we do. And I said, who's got the capital account? She said, well, that's out of my league. And you got to talk to the ownership about that. And so I said, okay, which one of the owners should I talk to? They said, Pooch Nussbaum would be the guy you should talk to about that. Okay? Because in those days, the ABA existed partly, well, in a big way, because they did deferred payments. And we get a basketball player, we're going to pay $100,000 a year. We're going to give you 50 now and 50 later.
Checks in the mail.
So we can spread it out so the cash flow doesn't kill us. Same way with capital, projects. So the Squires cost $1,100,000. So me in my infinite wisdom said, I know they only probably put up $250,000 now, and then we got 750 or so in the bank to work with. So that's when I asked Ada Mae. She said, I don't have that answer, but Mr. Nussbaum. So I called Pooch and I said, just a question. The capital account, I know you guys didn't give the league all $1,100,000 at this time in the history of the ABA. And Pooch said, as Virginia businessmen, we thought it was prudent to do that. And I said, Pooch, let me tell you how prudent it was. We're broke. We won't make the December 15th payroll. He said, what are you talking about?
That seems to be a problem.
Yeah, that's an issue.
And that was my life with the Squires for 2 years, making payroll.
Wow. Yeah, well, I've heard the stories of the players. Maybe their heads weren't even in the game because they're worried about.
Yeah.
So you've had some decisions to make. Another thing, not only running the team, you're also the head coach for 2 games. What happened? What happened here? You had to. You took over for Bill Musselman.
I hired and fired.
Okay.
And I
and you were the gap coach in between.
And before we hired Zelmo. And that was the best move we could have made. Zelmo Beatty was really good for us at the end, and we were pretty good. Rod Thorne told us, well, I don't want to play you guys at the end because we got everybody healthy. That was the other thing that happened to us. We got this big trade.
Jack 1-1, by the way, as a
Yeah,
head coach.
That's right.
Best
Yeah.
percentage of any Squires
yeah.
coach.
So we got through financially the first year with big loan from the bank and whatever you have to do.
Right.
Because I would not have been here had I known about the $1.1 million all being paid at one time. I would never have come here.
Has the ship sailed on major professional sports coming to Hampton Roads? I think it
I
has.
think so. I think the only one that would possibly have any chance at a major that level would be basketball. But you got to have a building.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have a building.
And they're $1 billion now.
Yeah.
And the franchise and expansion team is $3
Right.
billion. Where's that coming from
Yeah.
in this market?
Yeah. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And there's no way for baseball. Baseball's been here a couple of times. They didn't like the looks of this place.
Yeah. They were on the list when the Expos moved, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But and the Major League Baseball people didn't like the looks of this whole setup here. One of them jokingly said too much water.
So when did you get involved in the public address deal?
Through my good friend Dave Rosenfield.
We could do a whole
Yes, we could.
Dave Rosenfield.
Yes, we could.
Wow.
We because these things just keep coming back to me. I making a long story short.
So it was the Tides. Was it
Yeah.
Met Park or Harbor Park?
It was at Met Park.
Met Park, okay.
Yeah, Dave and I used to. Again, it's in the book, but I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on page number 137. Yeah.
Dave and I, when I first moved here, I took an interest because of Tides, and I was doing the Squires, and then I got to know him through his offices. Then he ran the hockey team for a while, and his offices were downstairs next to mine at Scope.
The Sharks?
Yep. Yeah. Anyway, so we got to be friends, and he and his second wife, Maida, who unfortunately passed away with a brain aneurysm. But we got to be very good friends, the four of us. We went to Jamaica together. We did all kinds of things. And we started bowling in a 4-person bowling league, co-ed bowling league. Well, my wife and I, both from Wisconsin, did bowling was not a new thing to us, but it was to Dave and Maida. And anyway, long story
He's a
short,
California guy, right? Yeah.
we would meet at the bowling alley. The wives would meet at the bowling alley. Dave and I would have a pregame session at Met Park with a couple of PBRs to get ready for bowling. You got to get ready for bowling.
Yeah, exactly. Sounds like my leagues.
Yeah, you just can't go bowl without getting ready to go bowl.
Exactly. Pregame,
And then one of these pregame meetings, he said to me, I'm losing my PA guy. Oh, really? He said, yeah, he's going to do the radio next year. That guy's name was Tony.
The Blast Man, Tony Mercurio. Whip it and dip it.
He said, so
It's a wing-ding doodler, Jack.
Oh, you can go on and on. Jeez. But he said, so I'm looking for a PA guy for next year. I said, oh, okay. He said, you've been around a little bit now. You got getting to know people around town who does these things, and threw out a couple of names, and he threw out a couple, and no, I don't like those guys. I don't want that guy. I don't want this guy. And he said, do me a favor. Do it for a year. You do it for a year. I said, 70 some baseball games? That's like getting married.
That's a commitment, right?
Yes. And he said, for a year. Well, that year turned to be 6. 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92. Then they moved to Harbor Park. And he said, no more PA for you. I want you on the radio. You and Rob Evans do the radio. Okay. That's fine. But that's how I got involved with PA. And then over at Old Dominion, I was doing radio first with Bob Rathman. Bob Rathman got me involved in a radio at Old Dominion. I wasn't doing anything but a season ticket holder. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but when they first joined the Sun Belt, the very first year, they won the regular season. And they had to play Jacksonville in the first round of the Sun Belt tournament. And odds-on favorite by a lot. Got beat. And the radio broadcast was not good. So a week after that happened, Bob called me because I knew Bob through the Tides and through. He said, "Can we have lunch? I want to talk to you about something." Sure. So he said, "Meet me at Denny's down on South Military Highway." Yeah, okay, fine. He said, "Did you listen to the game the other day, last week?" I said, "I did." And he said, "You know what I'm talking about, don't you?" I said, "Yes." I said, "But without mentioning any names." He said, "Yeah." He said, "So that's why I'd like to see if you'd be interested." I said, "What makes you think I can do that?" He said, "What makes me think you can do radio broadcasts on basketball? Let me think. You're a small college All-American. Huh? Small college All-American. You ran basketball teams. And
You sold cans.
and you coached. What makes you think? And he said, the fourth thing, you got a great voice." I said, "Nobody's ever said that. Nobody's ever told you that you have a great voice?" I said, "Never. Nobody, ever." He said, "Well, you do."
Iconic in Hampton Roads.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, "So therefore, that's the reasons why I want you to come and sit with me doing basketball." I said, "What about the other guy?" He said, "We're going to keep him, but he's going to have to raise his hand when he wants to talk." Okay. So that's how that all started with the radio. Then we lost the contract at WTAR.
I guess to 1310, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, Castleberry was the program director then over there. And we were having, WTAR was having issues with the Admirals and Old Dominion.
Mm-hmm.
The Admirals, Blake Cullen, would pay cash and buy the time. Old Dominion, they wanted them, WTAR, to sell it. The big difference between owning the time and, well, you know.
Yeah.
And so one day Jim Jarrett came over to see us at TAR with a checkbook. He said, "What will it take for us to stay on TAR and forget those Admirals?"
And TAR, a much better signal than 1310. 790 was a powerful AM station.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
First thing Bob Sinclair did when he bought it, moved 850 and 790, swapped them.
Yeah, I don't know. I was not a fan of that decision.
Right. But so that's what happened. We lost the contract to ESPN because our guy said no. Blake Cullen's been paying us regularly. He buys the time. And, you know, Old Dominion didn't want to be tape delayed, didn't want to have the women's tape delayed, didn't want to have.
And the Admirals, they were the new hot thing.
They were going strong.
They were going strong. It was a new thing. It was $5 to go to a game. I mean, when I was a kid,
Friday nights were the experience.
It was like, do you want to go to a movie or do you want to go see this hockey game for the same price?
Were they AHL at the time or ECHL?
ECHL.
Okay.
You know, when Blake had owned them.
But then so they had teams in Nashville and Columbus though, and Raleigh, teams that have NHL teams now. But anyway.
Yeah, so all of a sudden, after this all happened, the general manager called me in at the radio station. He said, "Dr. Jarrett wants to come and talk to me about the situation." I said, "Well, I thought we lost it." He said, "Well, we have, but I don't know what he wants to talk about, but I'll let you know what he wants." Okay. So after he had his luncheon meeting with Jarrett, he called me in and he said, "Guess what he wanted from me? The okay to talk to you about doing the broadcast on ESPN radio." And I told him, this is our general manager, said if Jack Ankerson can support him and his wife and 2 kids on what he would get paid for doing basketball on your radio station, at the other station, God bless him. I don't think he can do that. And of course I could not. There's no way. And that's how we lost it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what's your
So then I went into the PA. Then Debbie White said they were playing at the field house, and they were having like a PA announcer of the game. One day Joe Rubin was doing it. One day somebody else was doing it. Billy Graham was doing it one time. Debbie finally said to me, "Would you like to get involved in this mix?" I said, "Sure. I'd like to do the PA. I'm going to be here because I'm a season ticket holder. I'm going to be here.
front row seat?"
And And after going through my audition, so to speak, she said, "How about doing this full time for all the games?"
Have you scaled back on any of this, or do you plan
Yes,
on?
I have. I at the last was it last year? Yeah, early last year, I walked away from the Tides.
Okay.
It was the championship year. That at the end of that year, when we had that great team and we won everything,
It's an amazing team.
oh
It
my
was a
God.
great season.
Oh Jesus! It was fun to go to Harbor Park.
It really was.
Every night it was fun to go. But at the end of it, I was getting weary of the 6-game homestands, and I was missing a lot of my grandchildren's stuff. And I said, I think it's maybe time. The 6-game homestands were a killer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave Rosenfield used to make the International League schedule. What do you think he would think of this 6-game?
He'd hate it. Absolutely hate it.
Well, yeah, I specifically don't like it because Columbus never comes here. I'm a Cleveland fan. I want to see my affiliate here, and it just never happens.
Yeah. And it's seeing the same team for 6 straight days. It just it's really got to
And
me.
it feels like it's Gwinnett, Durham, and Charlotte every
yeah.
time they're.
right,
It's like
right.
they even
Yeah.
not only do they play them 6 times, but it seems like they come back.
Gee, we play one team 20 sometimes a year, and a couple of them.
Well, I think the
And-
message there is that for minor league baseball, it's just more about. I call Harbor Park the biggest bar in Norfolk. That's essentially what it is.
Look, that's exactly what it is. Minor league baseball is what it is. It can be very profitable,
Yeah.
as you know.
Yeah.
And so anyway, at the end of the year, of that year, taking orders for our rings, I said, I'm not sure about this. Let me put it off until March before it starts next year. Let me think about it some more. Well, of course, time heals everything, and got to March, and I said, no, I'll do it again. So I started. Well, the first 2 homestands, I said, what the heck are you doing? You thought about this at the end of last year for the right reasons, and here you are again. So I said, I'm walking away. So that's how I ended my 27, 28, 29-year career with the Tides.
Wow.
That's interesting. I do associate you and your voice with going to games. So it's a little jarring not hearing you anymore.
Yeah, and a gratifying
Yeah.
thing. Not that nothing against the guy who's doing it. I'm the guy who got him involved in all this stuff. So
Yeah.
with Brian Gimble, I'm the guy who got him started here. And but it's gratifying when I'm out and about and people say, "We really miss you. We really miss your voice at Harbor Park." I said, "Well, I thank you. I really appreciate that." I said, "What's wrong with the guy?" They said, "He's not you." That's what's wrong with him.
Nobody is. That's why he is
exactly.
Jack Ankerson, Jack of all sports. Thank you so much, Jack, for coming in.
Oh golly, Brian, this has been fun. I'm sure
Yeah,
I bored you with some of these long
No,
stories.
I wish
it's
we had.
not boring.
I wish we had more time.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. He's All-American in tennis and basketball and football at Ripon College. Executive of the Year, a master can salesman,
What?
one of the best can salesmen
Ever.
ever in Cincinnati and San Francisco,
Baltimore,
Oregon, Baltimore.
I think we should bring him on again sometime. What do you think, Brian?
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot we didn't get to.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, which is all in the book.
so where can people get this, Jack?
Okay, the book is available on Amazon. Just Amazon.com and search for Jack of all sports, and it's right there. You order it today, 2 days you get it.
Oh,
Yeah.
shipping. All right.
They're really, everybody that orders it said, "Geez, doesn't take 2 days I got."
Man, look at that. Look at that.
Boom.
Okay. Well, Jack Ankerson, thank you so much. I'm Brian Parsons, Jeff Snyder. Thanks for watching Sportswrap OT, and we'll see you next time.